Hello everyone, and welcome to our seminar series From Single to Mingle under just under 30 seconds, the how-tos in deciphering the dating code. I am very excited as our televised seminar won the Monty Awards for the Best Produced Show in the Educational category, as well as the Best Host Award in 2018. Now, the Monty's Award recognizes producers who constantly bring in creative content in different categories to TV shows. It's like the Academy Awards for producers. Now, my mission is to continue providing great, valuable content to my audience, the viewers at home, and of course, invite the best of the best guest panelists in the DMV area. Now, all this couldn't happen without the help of my amazing TV crew at the studio. Now, a big round of applause for them. Now, in our seminars, our guest panelists and myself work very hard in covering all topics related to dating and relationship in the 21st century, and primarily focusing on providing you with the tools needed to be successful in your journey to finding the special someone. Now, many of you probably came across my TV show, The Happiness Journey with Dr. Dan, where I invite guests from all walks of life to share their journeys in overcoming difficult challenges in their lives and managing to keep moving forward despite their hurdles. Now, so how do you define happiness? Now, we all have a different definition to what happiness means to us, individually speaking. Now, for some, it's a huge mansion by the ocean, while others would prefer excellent health and longevity. Now, most of us also look to that special someone to spend their life with. Now, once you find that person, it takes time, effort, and patience to keep the relationship joyful and long-lasting. Now, in all of our seminars, we cover different subjects that most find very challenging to overcome. It can be anything from online dating, sexual intimacy, proper manners when dating, and the list goes on and on. Now, our goal here today is to make sure that your journey is painless and very exciting. I have invited special guests with extensive knowledge in the field of dating and relationship. They are here to share their expertise with us. My name is Dr. Dan, and I'm your host for today's seminar. I have a doctorate degree in organizational leadership and communication with a minor in quantum physics. I also participate and I have a practicing therapist covering issues such as self-esteem, weight and anger management, and also do marital and relationship counseling. I do individual and group therapy as well. Now, for more information, you can contact me at the number below. Now, it is time to introduce our guests for today's seminar. Now, all experts will have the time to share their expertise and education with our audience and all of our DMV residents. Now, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll take some time to introduce each and every one. Let's start with you, Eric.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. This is really great. You talk about happiness, and this is happiness to me, just being with a bunch of wonderful people, talking about this with experts. I'm looking forward to it. My name is Eric Bravo. I'm a clinical psychologist. I have an individual private practice here in Gaithersburg, Maryland. I do individual therapy, group therapy, and marital counseling, and I specialize in addictions treatment and men's psychology.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for being here today, Dr. Eric. Go ahead, Nikki.
Thank you. My name is Nikki Inardo, and thank you again for having me. I am a dating preparation coach. My company is called Prepare to Be Pursued. I am a certified professional coach and also certified project management professional. I kind of combine both of those skills to develop a program to help women get back out there into the dating world that have totally just checked out of the process, kind of usher them back in a safe, secure way so that they come back in with confidence. And I also work with women that are actively dating who want to just simply improve the dating experiences.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for being here. I mean, I know we had reversal with the mail room. You were the host. I was the guest.
Yes,
thank you again. How about you, Daniel?
Sure. Thanks for having me. My name is Daniel Fleschner. I provide individual and couples therapy out of a practice in Bethesda called Harmony Holistic. Okay. And I specialize in communication styles, relationships, and attachment theory.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for being here, dear Daniel.
Thank you for having me. My name is Orly Katz. I'm a relationship and marriage counselor. I'm a certified professional counselor, primarily working with couples, a lot with after affair. Mm-hmm. I'm also, up until 18 years ago, I was a midwife and a labor and delivery room nurse. and a
change.
lactation consultant, and I changed my career. So I work a lot with new parents and relationship between the new parents after the birth of primarily the first child.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you all for being here. This is like just such a great panelist with different expertise, so I think we're going to have a great, great time. Now, as you know, today's topic is going to be how to fix a broken relationship or a marriage. Now, we all know for many who you've experienced before and you've provided therapy, the main issue is when there's infidelity. Some other factors may be money, finances, that can cause the demise of a relationship. So we're going to cover primarily this topic, but again, you know, based on our conversation, we may change tangent in some cases. So I'm going to ask a question to all of you, and you just kind of like just, you know, answer to the best of your ability. Now, I'll start with you, Eric. You said that there's a cumulative sign prior to determining that the relationship is doomed. If you can share what signs or what kind of like red flags people should know about, you know what, this relationship is not going very well, what can I do to fix it?
Yeah, that's sometimes very complex to tell, right? Oftentimes in relationships, especially long-term relationships, you get a little complacent, you stop paying attention, you get too comfortable, right? And so if you're not continuing to devote the work towards communicating, towards doing things with each other, towards paying attention to what you need in the relationship, you kind of miss the signs, right? But some telltale signs are disconnection, someone's pulling away, someone's not talking, someone's angry or being overly critical, someone is now all of a sudden spending more time in their appearance where that wasn't the case before. Someone is working later hours, right? Someone is maybe happier when they're outside of the house and they have a newfound joy of life, but when they get home, they get a little cranky or a little depressed, right? These are some signs to look for. It doesn't mean if someone is exhibiting these signs and they're having an affair or something, that there's something wrong with the relationship. It definitely means that they should be talking about it, though, right?
Okay.
So,
are you pertaining to the fourth horseman, which is the stonewalling? Is it that a part of the process to determining that there's something wrong?
absolutely, yeah. When communication stops, whether that's avoidance, stonewalling, some form of acting out, not being present, being disengaged, yeah, these are some signs to look for. Yeah, and if you try to engage in a conversation with somebody about it and they don't want to talk to you about it, that is even more of a sign that something's going on, right? Okay. You need that communication in order for the relationship to be working.
Beautiful. So Daniel, when, as we discussed like just a few minutes ago about infidelity, so when people come to you, okay, and let's say either the man or the woman strayed, and now it seems like there's close to 48% of women that do stray in some cases in some marriage. So what kind of advice do you give them to say it was just a one isolated incident, it's not going to happen again? Because once a cheater, always a cheater.
I think that there are a lot of situations in which infidelity can occur. I think a lot of the times there's other things going on in the relationship. And I don't say that to excuse the person who was unfaithful, because that's not an excuse. But it means that if somebody comes in seeking couples counseling because of infidelity, it means that while we'll be exploring that, we're going to have to dig deeper into the relationship as a whole and figure out what laid the groundwork to get the partners to that point. You alluded to the idea of once a cheater, always a cheater. It is true that sometimes people who are happy and in good relationships do cheat. It's not always a telltale sign of, oh, this relationship is horrible and that's why they cheated. But I think parsing those out and figuring out, well, are there things that we can work on that led to this, that we can fix to make sure this doesn't happen again? Or is this someone who just isn't respecting their partner? And I think it would be much more difficult to come back from that situation.
Okay, and how do you know if the couple is worth fixing when it comes to determining exactly, well, do we put the time in or this is like a lost case?
I think the fact that the couple is coming into my office in the first place is a pretty good sign that they're at least willing to explore the idea of getting past this incident of infidelity. I'm not here to make a value judgment on should you stay with somebody after being cheated on, or should you immediately leave them and have that be a deal breaker. I think that everyone is entitled to form their own opinion on that. The one really hard and fast rule I have in determining if I won't work with a couple is if it looks like only one of the partners is actually interested in being there, and the other one is getting dragged, kicking and screaming there, and is basically just there because they were given an ultimatum of, well, I'm going to leave you if you don't do this. So I, in my intake session, will make sure, all right, are you both invested? Are you willing to put in the work? And then if so, then great, let's get to it.
Okay, thank you. So to complement what he just said, what are the stages when you know that you've healed after an affair?
So the stages of after affair are very similar to grief. So initially, grief, we have 5 stages. We have the denial, we have the negotiation. If I did this, maybe it would have been different. And then we have the sadness and anger, and then the acceptance. So with the affair, it is very similar to those. The first stage is shock. It's a trauma. So the person, many say, I cannot eat, and you see them losing weight rapidly. They cannot sleep, they are depressed, they cry, they obsess over what happened and why me. That's the negotiation part. So the shock, and then they go through the negotiation, why me, what happened. If I did this, maybe it would have been different.
So it's the blaming part.
The blaming and a lot of guilt also.
Yeah.
And then the anger, very angry at the person who kind of like shattered their dreams. And then sadness, deep, it's not depression, but it is deep sadness. And very often I send people to psychiatrists to take antidepressants, medications during this stage. The acceptance is after the work has been done. They tune to each other, they reconnect, and the person who was betrayed feels good, in peace with themselves. They are okay with, not that they forgive and not that they not forgive and not forget, but they understand that there was a reason for that, and not necessarily their fault.
Okay.
And they can talk with their partner. They can talk about it, and we basically say, you know, you might not smile or laugh about it, but you might see it as later on in your 90s or something, as something that opened your eyes, and it's a growth experience.
Well, to follow through this, your answer actually now, Nikki, after this, going through the 5 stages, how do you regain this lost connection?
So in my experience working with women who have gone through this, right, and unfortunately those marriages didn't work out, so they end up coming to me. But one of the things that got them through that stage where there was a period of reconciliation was them getting to a place where they were able to see for themselves that they kind of lost themselves in a marriage, and taking some level of ownership to, like it was shared earlier, to kind of what they could have done to contribute to the environment. Not necessarily, you know, blame games or anything like that, but it's more of like, just let's both come together and try to figure this thing out. So that's primarily, I think, the thing that I've learned from the women that I've worked with. That's a major component of it.
Would you apply the metaphor that to make a good omelet, you need to break some eggs?
Yes.
And the breaking of the eggs, some people you go to the extreme, and then this betrayal kind of like bring them back together. Have you ever experienced in your practice where once someone cheated, that forced the door to open the door of communication because they lacked communication before? Have any of you dealt with this in your practice?
Yeah, definitely. I think there are 2 ways that a relationship can go. You know, after a trauma like that, it's either you split and you move your own way, or you get together, you figure out, like what you've been saying, you figure out what went wrong in the first place, how the 2 of you got disconnected. I think that there is an element of connection that can happen after bonding, after trauma, that you bond. Definitely, for sure. But like what you're saying, Dan, you need to determine what track you're on. Are we on the same page and making this work, or are we moving apart? That's the first step.
So what kind of exercise would you recommend your clients to be able to kind of get this relationship back on track?
Well, again, that's context specific. A lot of the times what happens is the complacency in a relationship, people losing themselves in a relationship, people not giving all they can in a relationship. It's just human nature, right? Once we've locked down a relationship and had kids, and we've got a business to run, and you've got a TV show to host, right? then you get a little, you get exhausted, right? So you try to divvy out all of your energy in all the places you can, and unfortunately you may not give back to the relationship as much as you did before. I think this is a big culprit in why this happens, right? So if you figure out like what started to happen that pulled us apart, and it doesn't often happen overnight, then you can figure out how to right the ship. But basically it comes back around to becoming your best self, right? How do I become my best self? If you're not giving all you can to your relationship, chances are you're not giving as much as you can to other areas of your life. So what are the things that fell by the wayside? How did I stop paying attention? Why did I stop paying attention? Did I stop courting? Did I stop listening? Did I stop giving my best? Did I stop making her feel romantic or sexy, or him romantic and sexy, right? And so when you figure out what that issue is, then you can start to work on that.
Okay. Well, I'm going to ask all of you actually a question that you can answer at your own pace. We're all in a relationship, married, steady girlfriend, boyfriend. How do you create work-life balance? As you mentioned, I mean, I had to negotiate with my wife to be able to take all the time to, to prepare the seminar, etc. So how do you guys do it? Do you say, well, I'm going to be gone for 18 hours in a row. I will not see you. You will not see me at all. But in return, I'm going to be able to invest that time. So what kind of compromise do you guys do?
That's a good question.
I love that question.
That's, we actually talk about how many hours I will work, but it's not necessarily work, it is the after work, because I still think about work. It is very difficult.
So you're not fully in then when you are with that person.
So it is, exactly. So how long does it take each one? And my husband, I've been married for almost 40 years.
Tell us your secret, Orly.
Giving space to each other to unwind from work. That means that if I come home from work, I'm not immediately able to discuss. I cannot talk about my work. I'm a therapist, so I can't talk about clients. But I talk about the office. We gossip a little bit. The front desk or whatever it is, things that are not, or social party or whatever. But I'm not ready to talk immediately. Same is with my husband. We do need something. So we have in our house, we have something that is like finger food, something that we can, like little pizzas or whatever it is, that we can just grab in for 15, 20 minutes or something.
They won't talk to each other.
We talk less. We do, yeah, we talk less. And this is on purpose because we really need to
decompress,
tune in to each other. And we cannot tune in when we are still occupied with our other life, which is 8-10 hours a day or whatever.
But it's like running the 100-meter. You cannot just stop right on track. You have to slow down until you get to the. But yes, I guess. So what about you guys? What do you think about how do you do the work-life balance? That is something that worked for both of you, because you may do something that your wife said, no, hold on, that doesn't work for me. Right. You need to kind of compromise. So what are the compromises?
One of the things that I had to be very aware of prior to getting in a relationship with my boyfriend was, while I was single, I had to, because I'm very busy, full-time job, and do this also, single mom. So with all that on my plate, I knew that I had to make time for a new person coming into my life, even prior to actually starting a relationship. So that's something that I was consciously preparing myself, for. And so when it happened, I had to constantly remind myself that, okay, now I have another individual in my life that's going to want part of my time. And it is really just the intention, like really just making it a constant awareness that I care about this person. This person wants access to me. I have to, accommodate those things reasonably. And then also choosing a person that is, reasonable. That was an issue prior. I dated a guy that just wanted all my time. It had no respect for things that were on my plate, and that was absolutely a deal breaker for me. So, it's just as long as those things are in place and you're able to talk about things on a regular basis and always just feel the temperature of the other person, and if they're feeling neglected, that's something you want to be conscious of. So I just think it's an ongoing thing.
And what about you, Daniel, beside the fact that you have to cater to her knee?
So I have a couple thoughts on this. The first is that you need to be very intentional about what things you're taking on and what that's going to mean in terms of your relationship and in terms of your time. So when I was weighing job offers or figuring out which way I wanted to go in this field, I considered what hours is this going to require, how is this going to take up my attention, what will it be like for my mental state, and included in that is how much time will I then have to spend with my girlfriend, and will we be able to go away for the weekend if we want to? What will the salary do in terms of our lifestyle and in terms of just the things that we've discussed are important to the two of us. The second thing I want to say is that it really needs to be congruent with who you two are as a couple. So what works for me could be wildly different than what works for you. So there's no answer of, oh, this is just exactly how you do it. You need to have a conversation with that person and say, hey, this is what I think would work when I start this new job or when I pursue this new certification. What do you think?
Absolutely.
You, Mr. Eric?
Yeah.
I mean, you have 2 young kids. So
Yes.
having young kids kind of changed the equation here.
It does, and it's very difficult to balance it all, right? Because if I feel like I'm spending too much time with the kids, too much time, there's no such thing. I love spending time with them, but I also know that I'm sacrificing the time with my patients and another part of my life that I love, right? So it is a very fine balancing act, right? I think the first thing is to find something that you're very passionate about. The second thing is to do just what you said, Dan, which is to have that conversation about how that impacts your relationship. But it doesn't always mean that when you're dividing up your time that it's equal, right? So I spend most of my time at work, as I imagine we all do. But when you're with your loved ones, you're with your loved ones. You're giving that amount of passion to your family. It, you know, time-wise, it doesn't really add up, but as long as you're there and you're giving all that you can. And if something feels like it's missing, then you just have to sacrifice more from your job or whatever else you have going on and siphon it back into your family. It's a constant balancing act.
I agree. Now, we all know as being therapists, we tend to absorb negative energy from our clients, okay? Because all the problems they deal with, all the issues, the divorce, the betrayal, how do you cut that? So when you leave the office, it's kind of like amnesia, and you forget that, and you come home and you don't, does it weigh on you when you go home?
I spend time with people like we have on the panel here. That's how I counterbalance that. A lot of positivity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's very important. This we call it supervision group or something,
Yeah.
and we do it on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. I have my little, we have our little group, and we talk about not necessarily about clients, but mostly about ourselves and how are we dealing with not necessarily about clients, but different things and.
So when, yeah, go ahead, Daniel, I'm sorry.
So I was just going to say, the thing that's really important there is just making sure that you're taking care of yourself and that you're building your own resiliency. So if I go through a stage when I'm not eating well and I'm letting my own stuff in my life come up a little bit more, it becomes increasingly difficult both to leave the stuff at work, as you talked about, but also to do the level of work that my clients deserve. So something that works for me is the fact that I usually have a 2 or 3 hour break in the middle of the day when I can go to the gym, I can eat a nice healthy lunch.
Good.
So making sure that, hey, I'm not in a place right now where I can see 8 clients in a row, so I'm gonna schedule a few in the morning, I'm gonna take a lunch break, I'm gonna schedule a few in the afternoon, and just being intentional about your own self-care and really leaning into that.
I mean, we're all humans, we're not cyborg, so we deal with emotional, turmoil sometimes. So when we take everything from our clients or our patients, we tend to kind of like add more weight on our shoulder, which that can have negative impact on our own relationship and our family. So, but if we go back to the affair or the infidelity or any other, like for example, also financial, in which in some cases I know that some women or some men in a relationship, they hide financial, that they don't say how much debt they are having or how many issues they deal with. Keeping secrets. What do you guys think about that? I mean, would you say well, there are somewhat, they do not want to put the burden on someone else, so they're selfless and not selfish, and they want to be able to manage it their own. What would you advise in situation that you face probably? Would you say open communication and tell them the worst of everything?
You pointed right at me when you said that.
I mean,
my expert opinion? Or?
Well, yeah, I mean, or everything that you've dealt, probably like, yeah, you're expert, not necessarily you dealing. No.
These questions.
No.
I don't know where you're coming from.
I wasn't pointing fingers at you. I had experience at your own situation.
Yeah. So, hiding things is not good. Right? You talk about this idea of hiding finances. I mean, there's a lot that's coming out about what they call financial affairs now. It's where you're kind of siphoning off money, or you're buying things that you're not supposed to, and you just kind of sneak them into the closet, right? I mean, those kinds of things, right? That's not good, right? Any kind of thing where you're hiding certain things that you're doing, it's not good. It's corrosive. And in addictions therapy, we say we're only sick as our secrets, right? I mean, those things do take a weight, and they do slowly corrode at your relationship. And you're constantly just kind of thinking, did I say this? Did I do that? And it's just, you're not present when you're in that place.
Well, the reason why I asked you the question, because you're, like in the addiction side of it, and you have gamblers.
Yes.
So they're putting the family into financial ruin. So what do you tell them when it comes to, well, look, if you have a problem, deal with it, but it's not overnight that they can fix their gambling problem. So what would you recommend at this point?
Yeah, the first thing is when you find yourself in a hole is put down the shovel, right? So oftentimes when someone comes in with like a gambling addiction or any kind of secretive stuff going on, right? We talk about infidelity, we talked about, hiding money, gambling. It needs to be talked about, because you got yourself into that problem by yourself, and you're not going to be able to get yourself out. You need help, right? You've been trying to find your way out of it unsuccessfully. So you come to a guy like Dan to try to help you figure that out, try to help pull you out, and then involve the family. But the thing is, it also has to be a supportive family, or a supportive wife, or whomever it is. They have to be supportive. You don't want to set someone up to ask for help when they're just going to get lashed out on. Anger is part of the process, but just to get everything out in the open, I think, is always a best practice.
Daniel, if you want to comment on this?
Yeah, I think I'm completely on the same page there. You really do need to be open and honest about what's going on. And something that a lot of people don't consider is that if there's an issue, especially a big financial one in a marriage, you're showing a fundamental lack of respect by not disclosing that, because you're taking away the person's agency. Your partner would then be engaging in a relationship in which they didn't have all the facts, and in which they were basically being lied to. And so I think that you really do need to get out in the open, and the reason I think a lot of people don't do that is that they're fearful that their partner is going to leave them, or they're fearful that they're going to lose something. But I think it's necessary to find the courage to take that chance, and that might happen, but it's better than trying to keep digging yourself in the hole and having that shovel.
True.
Secrecy is one thing, but making things way more complicated than your partner can comprehend. So I have couples that they work on the budget, let's say, together, but one of them is making it so complicated that the other person gives up, and I don't understand anything anyway. So you do it. And so after an affair, I had a couple that after the affair, the betrayed person wanted the other one to make it very simple for them, so they will understand. So secrecy is one thing, but sometimes it is so complicated. The way they did this budget with the online and whatever, it was so complicated that the betrayed person was in a way put down.
Okay. But would you, I'm not sure exactly about your point of view, like in any relationship or any marriage, would you advise that everyone do have their separate accounts so they could have their own spending money versus something they all have to be combined and have to ask each other's permission? Can I go and spend this? Do you feel that this independence will create a closer connection to each other versus having to always ask, hey, can I buy this?
That's $1 million question.
Yes.
Because
it's a very sensitive, because money,
it
finances is always something
but also
that,
it depends on the style. In today, because I see a lot of young new parents,
yeah.
young parents, they're so independent. And
New generation. This
new
is maybe-
generation,
yeah.
very often, one of them is making 2-3 times more than the other one. Especially after a delivery, if the mother is home, not the mother, not necessarily. A lot of fathers are at home now.
Oh yeah, paternity leave.
Stay
that happens a
home,
lot.
stay
Yeah.
home fathers, even after. So it makes a big difference for them. They cannot give up their independence so quickly. So they do need some money on their own. Take an older couple.
older
With more
generation, yeah.
traditional, she was sitting at home after they need the joint account. And I will not say necessarily permission, I will say talking about expenses, but each couple is different, and I can see the generations difference.
But would that fix the problem with financial challenges that people can face when it comes to, like, if you'll have your own expense account, so-called, and you could go and buy whatever you want as long as it's under, like, not taking away from paying the mortgage, paying the electricity, etc. Would you go and recommend that for the meantime until they get their problem solved?
You're looking at me. So
Yeah, yeah, again,
Answer the
because
question.
addiction
Okay.
expert, with gambling and whatever it is.
All right.
Because gambling, like I said, if they have their own account, spend all your money from your own
Yeah,
account.
right. It's a big problem. That's a big problem. I think it's a stylistic thing. What feels best to the couple is what they should do, right? So some couples like the idea of getting all their money and putting it in one big pot, and we're in this together, and what are our expenses? Let's talk about this, and let's siphon off what our monthly expenses are. And if there are any big purchases, they talk about what those are. That's fine. Some people like to have a pot and they have their own separate accounts, right? Because they feel like they are holding on to their sense of independence, and they can, like, buy really nice gifts for each other without the other one knowing, or those kinds of things. But when you get into the realm of, like, we have what we think is our money, and then this person has, like, a mountain of debt or their own bank account, I don't know what's going on, and that's dangerous, right? Because it just creates the space for somebody to, kind of maneuver, right? But when it's all out there, you don't have that space to do
At least
that.
as long as there's communication, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
Okay. As long as transparency. That's exactly.
We
Now,
can join our bank accounts if you want.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
can
of
just
course.
give your account information, and we'll try
I'll
it.
send you, like, bank transfer, not a problem.
Yeah, you can trust me.
Oh, I have no doubt. Talking about trust, okay, let's go and tackle that. Now, in case of infidelity, I know each case is different from the other, but what is the average time that someone can feel like they forgave but never forgot about the case? So
2 years.
2 years?
About.
What about you guys?
Well, you answered that fast.
Yeah,
I
it's-
had that thought as well.
Because I've seen it, and so I see kind of like especially after the year, because it's the déjà vu, right? It's a year, it's the holiday, all the trauma, the triggers are almost kind of like we've experienced the anniversary of the affair.
Oh, yes.
The holidays, the trauma, and so all those triggers are kind of like we've been through those. That's the second time, so that's why a year and a half to 2 years. I would say.
So you would say that each stage is around 5 months.
I think the shock is first of all it is fluid, so you can go from not the shock so much, but sadness and anger. You can go up and down.
Okay.
You can be sad, you can be angry, you can be. But the shock, the trauma, the shock, the acute trauma is about 3 to 6 months,
Okay.
and then kind of like in between, I would say. It's not like a definite. Now I'm angry. Now I'm sad. Now I'm. But
So you were against the 2-year thing. What would you say, Eric, about the time that it would take to not fully heal, because you never fully heal?
Right, that's right. It's hard to know. I mean, I was just really interested because she obviously has a lot of knowledge in that area. But it's interesting to know that it's fluid. That it certainly makes sense. It's hard, right? Because you don't forget. When you see what someone's capable of, you always know that they're capable of behaving that way. And maybe even like we all can kind of say, we're all capable of doing things that we don't really think we're capable of. We're all capable of a certain level of doing things. right? Once you understand that, you can learn from it, you come back from it, you can just kind of keep your eyes open in the future. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to just kind of, you know, get rid of everything, but you can watch. You can watch. I think it gets better with time. So I don't know, Nikki. I'm wondering what you think about this. I'm sure you see it all the time.
Yeah, I see a lot, but it's really the aftermath, unfortunately, that I kind of work with. A lot of divorced women that are recovering, you know, after the end. So they're still working through some things, you know. They, in working with them and coaching with them, they may not have totally gotten over, and like you say, it's probably likely that you'll never get over it. You know, it's how do you move forward? How are you going to reclaim your future? You know, and a lot of what I try to focus on in my coaching is, well, coaching by nature is very forward thinking, right? So it's developing that vision for one's future. So the same thing that I kind of apply for the single women that I work with, I can imagine could be beneficial to couples too. If there would be an exercise or an opportunity for an exercise for both individually, for them to develop a vision of how they see their relationship going or their marriage going. You know, either it be a visual thing or a written type of, you know, journal entry or something like that, and then they can come back together and kind of share it and see where that kind of takes them. You know, just, it's a good way to kind of, like, I can imagine, make sure everybody's on the same page, you know, they have the same end goals in mind, you know.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I like this approach. I usually draw on a whiteboard. Here is, you were driving gingerly, everything went well, and then now you are in the ditch here. So we are here now. We are in the ditch now. It depends where they are when they come to me. So we have a choice. I can guide you in getting out of this ditch and drive gingerly. And so you got married, let's say, at 30, and now you are at your in your 90s, so 30s, 40 something, and then you can move on, or you can get stuck here. It is your choice. And some people are not healed, and some people resist, and some people are very angry for years after. It's not necessarily that they're
Like
everything
a
is
fixed
great,
number of years that, yes,
but that's another.
Another conversation.
Another
definitely.
conversation, right?
I bet your favorite show must be 90 Day Fiancé on TLC, right? With long distance relationships. So how, you know, nowadays with online dating, people meet people from all around the world, and I mean, I would say the internet connects people, but at the same time, it pushes them away, like just dark energy in space. When it comes to long distance relationship, how can people make it work? I mean, especially already when it's local, it's difficult. How can long distance be?
So I think there are a couple things relevant to long distance relationships. The first is really figuring out what works for you and getting in that kind of rhythm. So there are some couples that really like to say, okay, this is when we're going to talk each day or every other day or something like that. And that gives them something to look forward to and it's comfortable. There are other couples in which each person is potentially more of a free spirit and they say, you know what, we'll talk when we talk, we can make it work, but we don't want to completely put our lives on hold or have our schedules be too bogged down. And neither of those are better or worse, but I think it's important for both partners to be on the same page. The other thing that I think is important is to have some kind of plan for what's going to happen when the long distance ends, as well as when that plan is going to happen. So I think it's very difficult if you're in a long distance relationship and you're kind of staring into this endless abyss of long distance. That seems to be a lot worse than, you know, I have one more year of college left, and in that year, I'm going to look for jobs or grad school or something in whatever city you're in. Or we both could use a change. So in 18 months, we're both going to move to California or whatever place they'd like to go.
Okay, common ground. Okay, interesting. Now, when it comes to, you know, especially after going through like a bad situation in a relationship or like a difficult challenge, what would you all recommend are the ideal steps? I know they're different from one to the other, but ideal steps to kind of like reconnect and, you know, redate your husband and wife, you know, because sometimes, as you mentioned, Eric, we go with life, we go with our responsibility with work, we go responsibly with kids, we go responsibly about paying bills, etc. So would you go back on a date with your wife? Kind of say, okay, you know what? We'll get a babysitter and we'll go like we first started dating. What are the other steps that people should take to be able to bring back the love and the excitement of dating?
It's interesting. I'm wondering if you're asking me to go out on a date with your wife, or
Yeah.
to get I mean, some people
Polyamory,
that
the
gives them
relationship, I'm
excitement.
not sure, but no.
That's some people that's what.
Wait, let's start with your wife first.
You want to go out with my
No,
wife?
no. Let's start with
Okay,
you
sorry.
going on with, yeah, but you get the point.
I can't help myself
No, I know.
sometimes. Yeah, well, I mean, look, so you never really, look, this is the ideal, right? We all need to work on this. You never really stop dating, right? You're always dating, right? It's when you stop dating, that's when you get into trouble. You always want to have an element of mystery, an element of enthusiasm, an element of, let's go do this new thing together, keep things alive and spicy, you know? So it's, you know, about, if there's a trauma and you're trying to reconnect, you're literally starting over again. You're starting over again from scratch. You have to wipe the mentality clean that we've been together X amount of years, we've done all, no, you're starting from scratch. You're building all over again. You're trying to find out what went wrong in the first place if you decide you want to put the energy back in the relationship. And in that iteration of it, you've got to come correct. You've got to do the right things. You've got to really put your best foot forward. Right?
Interesting.
I would say to pay attention.
Go
I would say to pay attention throughout the day, even during your day or whatever. Drop a note, call. Just make sure that, hey, I'm thinking about you. Even a text. I usually don't like texts for couples in distress, but in this case, yes, just drop a note. Just, I'm thinking about you. Hey, lunch is great. I wish you could be here. Something like that, to let your partner know that you are thinking about them throughout the day, here and there.
Go ahead.
Well, I think a good starting point is considering what attracted you to your partner in the first place.
Correct.
So I totally agree with the concept that ideally you should never stop dating your partner. Of course, we don't live in an ideal world, and sometimes that kind of thing is going to happen. But if you really get back to basics and say, you know, you took me out to this wonderful restaurant, and then we went dancing, and that was the day I realized I was incredibly attracted to you, then go back to that restaurant and go out dancing.
That just gave me chills when you said that. Even you saying that, I was like, wow, that's that. Okay.
Should take that
There
point
you
around.
Yeah, that's good.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So my thought about it is, again, I work with singles, but there's an element of some of what I do that could be applicable here. So what I like to say around being prepared to be pursued is rediscover your allure. So the purpose of that really is to get back in touch with yourself, right? Because sometimes what, you know, kind of contributes to things getting complacent is we're not excited about ourselves anymore. You know what I mean?
Agreed.
You know, new moms, or you're stressed at work, or whatever it is, both from a male or female standpoint, loss of a job, something could happen to just really crush a person's self-esteem. And so if there is something, there's something that you're doing for yourself to build yourself up, to get excited about yourself again, then you can create an environment where, you know, it's mutual. And so the passion could just be reinfused in a relationship. So.
In your therapy practice, have you seen any situation where, as we mentioned before, where one of the couple is putting too much stress in trying to fix the relationship, and it's quite obvious? I mean, have you seen anything or any scenario where you know that this person has already signed out of the relationship? What kind of experience have you faced related to that?
So when one partner is much more invested than the other?
Correct.
Is that what you're asking?
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest red flags that I can see. It's important to evaluate at the beginning of therapy, why are we here and what are we hoping to accomplish? So one of the first things I like to ask in my intake session is, I want you to give me 2 or 3 things that my partner would give as a reason why I'm here. And if one partner says, oh, well, my partner would say I'm here because, you know, I was given an ultimatum and I had to be here, then it's time to really have an honest conversation of whether they're interested in being in that relationship. And part of my intake process is that after that first session, I like to have one individual session with each partner. And that can be a time to really ask, you know, what are you looking to get out of this? What's your level of investment? And I'm not in a place where I'm going to tell a couple to break up, but I just want them to think about, is this a healthy relationship and is this a relationship that I should pursue?
Interesting.
I will also add, why aren't you invested? Because very often they kind of like gave up. And I would like to know why they're not invested, why they're not giving as much or as much as the other person is giving. There might be a reason for that. And I would like to know more about it. So
Maybe
I can
someone
bring
is
them
not
to the
really-
same level.
But if they're not really communicative, I mean, they don't know how to communicate properly. They do not know how
Or
to
they don't feel safe.
they don't feel safe, yeah.
Not physically, but emotionally safe to say, hey, this is what I'm thinking. And so they just shut down. They shut down, and I need to get them out of this mode so they can be on the same level and say, you know what? Oh, it's a safe place. I can start expressing my needs, my emotions.
Well, and it's also important to look at what's going on in that person's life as an individual. So someone can appear to not be giving their all in couples counseling. They can appear to not be giving their all in a relationship, when in fact they do really love that person and want to make it work, but they're depressed or they have something else going on and they just don't have the mental or physical energy to devote to that. So it could be a situation where it's not the relationship that's the issue, but it's that individual person that needs to figure out what he or she is going to do to fix their own stuff.
Interesting. Now, for all of you, would you say it's easier to fix physical, I would say, physical infidelity versus emotional infidelity? Any of you?
You go ahead.
I will say that's easier physical, especially for men. Unfortunately, there are some differences, and women are more need the emotions
Involved, correct.
first, evolved and developed first. So to develop emotions, it takes time. So it takes time so you know the person more than just physical. Physical could be very short time. They can move to the physical aspect. But emotional, it takes longer. So the longer it takes to heal and recover.
Understood. Any of you?
So the research would suggest that men generally feel more hurt by physical affairs, whereas women feel more hurt by emotional affairs. So I think it would depend on who you asked, but I actually think, and this is going to go against the research, but I think that emotional affairs can be more difficult to come back from because it's likely that that other person is still present. So there can be a desire to reach out to that person. The person who's having the emotional affair could still be talking to that other individual. So it just seems like there's a lot more factors at play than a physical affair, especially if the physical affair was a one night off thing in which that person is no longer involved.
Nikki?
Yeah, the only thing that I would guess is if the physical aspect is due to addiction, then that would be a lingering behavior, not necessarily a threat of that person that that individual cheated on with, but that individual repeating that behavior. So
Well, that's interesting about the addiction. And you, Eric?
Yeah, well, I think in a case like addiction, that would make a lot of sense. But it's still the same thing, you know. It's bad behavior is bad behavior, you know. And so, you know, regardless of the reason for it, you know, you kind of want to address it and stop it in its roots.
right, absolutely.
So if I would ask you, what would be the best advice that you can give to our viewers at home and our audience about what are the best steps that would be more universal, that would work for most couples on how to, I would say, reboot a relationship after affair or after infidelity, either financial, physical, whatever it is. So is there like there's no checklist, but what would you recommend? Each and every one, like I said, this is for the viewers at home who are actually focusing on your comment.
Pay
or your
attention
advice.
to each other.
Sorry?
Pay attention to each other. And as I said, throughout the day, learn the language of love. Some people, of your partner, some people love presents. So
Now,
make
the 5
sure.
love languages.
The I will hesitate
okay. There's
to
more
this
than that
because
maybe
I've
for you.
seen some
Okay.
some unpleasant things. But But some people love presents. Presents for them show not necessarily expensive or not, but show caring. Oh, she cared about me, and therefore she paid attention. She saw that I wanted 1, 2, 3. So if the person, if the wife, let's say, gets him the stuff that he talked about 3 months ago, for him that might be caring. Some people need
quality time or
need
words of
time,
affirmation.
quality
it
time,
depends,
but
yeah.
more attention, paying attention in kind of like the umbrella for all of this. Paying attention to your partner's personality, your partner's need, and also learn to ask questions in an empathic way to show that you do care.
So if anyone applies the 5 love languages from Chapman, would you say that this is already a good start on how to reboot the relationship? It's understanding what really is their love language and to be able to apply all the, because as she mentioned earlier, there's not really only 5. There's more of a combination, okay? And so one may be words of affirmation, but a little bit of act of service, or one is act of service primarily, but then quality time would be another one. So there's not only one specific love language that each and every one have, but would you say this is a good start?
I think the love languages are a digestible way to talk about a bigger concept, which is understanding what makes your partner tick, understanding what's important to your partner, and then figuring out ways to honor that and to bring that into your relationship.
Nikki?
Communication is just really the major thing that always sticks out to me. And then also staying away from the blame game, because a lot of times when that happens, you're not allowing yourself the opportunities that exist to grow. So
I like the blame game one.
yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Miss Eric?
Yeah, I'm going to take a different angle on this. And I think it to kind of look at the individual and say, what bad behavior have I been putting up with in myself, in this other person? What am I enabling? What am I not enabling? Am I settling for less love than I deserve? Right? Because I think we all have a narrative, and if in that narrative you think to yourself, well, this is all I'm ever going to get. I just had a gentleman come in yesterday, and he was telling me about his relationships, and his narrative was, anytime I reach out, people don't reach out back to me. That's his narrative, and so we want to work on that, right? So those are the kinds of things to work on with yourself, you know?
So for the last few words before we conclude the seminar, what would you all agree on the one magic pill for fixing a broken relationship? What would it be?
Come to Dr. Dan and see him.
Here you go. Beside that one. Here you go.
Bravo.
Eric,
And
Nikki,
see
Daniel,
which
and
camera
Orly.
I'm
Yes.
looking at. Come see me, we'll fix it.
His phone number is right below on the third lower stage.
Communication and attention, I would say. Communication is learning how to get your point across and be caring about the other person. And attention, which kind of like leads to good communication. Paying attention to yourself, your partner.
Interesting.
These are the 2 main issues, I think.
And for the last word, Dan?
So I think it's important to figure out what steps you're willing to take and what is something that you're not willing to compromise on. Commit to taking the steps that you're willing to take and then actually follow through on it.
Okay, well, folks, that's all the time we have for today. I would like to be able to first thank my guest for attending today's seminar. Their contact information will be provided on the lower third part of the TV, and as well as the credit at the end of the show. Now, here are a few concluding words of wisdom when it comes to relationship really worth fixing. Now, if you want to save a broken relationship, the first thing you must do is consider whether or not the relationship is really worth fixing in the first place. Now, are your feelings for him or her only temporary or permanent? Did he or she make you feel wonderful 1 minute and terrible the next? Or would you simply take him or her for granted? Now, these are not questions to be answered lightly. Now, you see, love knows no limit to its endurance, no end to its trust, and no fading of its hope. It can outlast anything. Love still stands when all have fallen. However, in any relationship, either steady or marriage, whatever it is, you can't focus primarily on affairs of the heart. You need to also use your brain. Do not let your heart make all the decisions, or you may end up with massive migraines and empty bank accounts. My name is Dr. Dan Amzalag, and have yourself a wonderful journey in finding that special someone.